They didn't know who she was. The moment she stepped into bank, heels sharp, posture regal, a black turtleneck tucked into tailored beige slacks. They saw only skin, not the company badge around her neck, not the tired lines beneath her eyes from running board meetings back to back, not the calm power in her voice when she said, "I'm here to authorize a transfer." Her name was Clarissa Monroe, 48, mother 2, founder and CEO of Monroe Dynamics, a black-owned tech firm that had just inked a $2.5 billion global partnership the night before. But to the teller behind the counter, she was just another black woman asking for too much. It started with a look, the kind that lingers. Cold, suspicious, the kind black mothers teach their daughters to recognize before they even learn to spell it. Clarissa placed her ID on the counter with her manicured fingers and waited patiently. The teller, a young white woman with a tight bun and an even tighter frown, barely glanced at it before sliding it back with a scoff. "You sure this is real?" she said, loud enough to draw stares. Clarissa didn't flinch. She'd spent 2 decades fighting boardroom racism. Being underestimated was familiar. "I'm sure," she said evenly. The teller rolled her eyes, picked up the ID again, examined it as it were forged, and then, with deliberate disrespect, dropped it on the floor. Not slid, not handed back. Dropped, like trash. Clarissa stared at the card lying face up near her heel. Silence stretched. Then she bent slowly, picked it up, and placed it back on the counter. "I'm requesting a transfer of $8.5 million to our satellite office in Accra," she said calmly. "It's pre-approved and time-sensitive." But the teller was already shaking her head, waving a manager over with performative urgency. "She's being aggressive," the teller whispered. "I don't feel safe." Those words, soaked in centuries of weaponized bias, were a match to gasoline. Clarissa's fingers clenched. The bank manager arrived. Middle-aged, smug, the type who hid behind policy when prejudice did the talking. "Ma'am," he said, not even glancing at her documents, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Excuse me?" Clarissa said, stunned. "We reserve the right to refuse service. You're causing a disturbance." Cameras weren't rolling. No crowd was protesting. It was just another quiet injustice behind polished marble counters and silent nods of approval from onlookers. Clarissa didn't shout. She didn't cry. She gathered her ID, her pride, and walked out without another word. What they didn't bother to know, was that Monroe Dynamics had just signed a global payment deal with the World Tech Finance Group. And this bank was set to process every international transaction. Until that moment, back in her car, Clarissa sat still. Her hands trembled, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of being done. She dialed a number. "Elias," she said, "pull the contract. Effective immediately." "Everything?" her CFO asked. "Everything," she replied. "We don't bank where we're not seen." That same evening, the bank's regional VP received a call from Monroe Dynamics' legal team. A full termination of partnership, effective immediately, citing irreparable breach of ethical trust. By morning, $2.5 billion in projected processing revenue had vanished, and no one at that branch knew why. The teller arrived at work smug, sipping her iced coffee, still bragging to a co-worker about putting that woman in her place. But something was off. Phones ringing off the hook. Branch manager pacing. A corporate compliance officer at his desk in silence. Then the internal memo hit. Due to an incident involving misconduct and discriminatory behavior, Monroe Dynamics has terminated all relations with our institution. This is now under federal review. All involved staff are suspended pending investigation. The teller's smile faded. Her name, in bold. The footage, pulled. The HR rep, already on site. Clarissa didn't gloat. She didn't post. She didn't tweet a single thing. She didn't need to. Silence. The same silence they tried to use against her became her weapon. Word spread, not because she shouted, but because the world did it for her. Within 48 hours, 4 other black-owned firms quietly withdrew funds. The bank stock slipped 3.8%. An emergency board meeting was called. And somewhere in a high-rise office overlooking Atlanta's skyline, Clarissa sat at the head of her boardroom table, sipping tea. Her assistant entered. "We've been asked if you'll reconsider. They're offering revised terms. Full apology. Public statement." Clarissa looked up, eyes calm. "Let them talk to my silence." But what the world didn't know, that the teller's father sat on the advisory board of a rival firm trying to sabotage Monroe Dynamics' expansion, that her targeting of Clarissa wasn't just ignorance, it was strategy, and it had just begun. Because a week later, Clarissa received a package at her home. No return address. Inside, a printed email from her own CTO. Leaked, secret, colluding with the rival. They hadn't just tried to humiliate her in a bank. They were trying to dismantle her from within. But they underestimated the wrong woman. Clarissa Monroe had been disrespected before, dismissed, undervalued, but betrayed? That was new. She picked up her phone, dialed a secure line. Voice comm. Code. Activate Watchtower protocol. Because this time, it wasn't just about justice. It was about exposure. And as the night fell over Atlanta, a storm began brewing. The kind that doesn't just shake windows. It shatters empires. The world thought it was over. That Clarissa Monroe had made her statement, dropped the mic, and walked away. That the silence was the end of the story, not the beginning of a reckoning. But in Clarissa's world, silence wasn't surrender. It was surveillance. Because when you build $1 billion tech company from your kitchen table, while raising 2 kids and battling boardroom racism, you learn to play chess while they're still bragging about checkers. The leaked email burned in her hands. Her own CTO, Marcus Vane, the man she mentored, elevated, protected from the sharks, had been forwarding internal memos to Global Logic, her largest competitor. The same Global Logic that had tried to buy Monroe Dynamics last year and was denied. The email was short, cold. She won't see it coming. They were right. She didn't. But now she had. Clarissa didn't cry. She convened a midnight board session. No PR, no lawyers, just loyalty. Her CFO Elias, her general counsel Naomi, and Maya, her daughter, head of cybersecurity at just 26, and far more dangerous than she looked. Marcus was never working alone, Clarissa said, voice calm, composed, terrifying. They knew about the Ghana deal before it closed. They knew about our patents. They knew about the protocol. Naomi leaned forward. "You think the teller incident was a trap?" Clarissa looked at her. "I think they wanted me to react, to go public, to look emotional, unstable. Too volatile for international markets." A long pause. The realization swept the room like a chill. They hadn't just tried to humiliate her. They were trying to disqualify her from the very game she had built. But there was one thing they hadn't counted on. Maya had been monitoring digital fingerprints around their proprietary documents for weeks. At first, she thought it was a breach from overseas. But no, it came from inside the building. Inside the private server room, a thumb drive, inserted after hours. Twice, Clarissa nodded slowly. "I want everything. Logs, footage, even air quality sensor readings. I want to know who was in that room and what they touched." Elias leaned in. "What are you planning?" Clarissa looked out at the Atlanta skyline. "Justice," she said, "but not the kind they expect." The next day, she entered HQ like nothing had happened. Marcus was waiting with a fake smile and a thick file, board updates as requested. Clarissa smiled, took the file. "Let's chat at 4 p.m. He didn't see it, the flicker in her eyes. By noon, Maya had traced a server room entry to a security contractor, Argus Black, a firm with deep ties to Global Logic. And Marcus? He'd signed off on the contractor himself. No board approval. No documentation trail. But Maya found something else. Something bigger. They hadn't just tried to sabotage Monroe Dynamics. They had cloned the entire infrastructure, platform code, patents, even Clarissa's pending AI ethics framework. And Global Logic? They were planning to launch it as their own. In 2 weeks. Clarissa sat at the head of the conference table at 4 p.m. sharp. Marcus swaggered in like nothing was wrong. You wanted to see me? Clarissa slid the leaked email across the table. Then another. He stared. You know, she said, I almost believe you were loyal. Almost. Marcus stood. Clarissa? No. She cut in. You don't speak in this room anymore. She slid over a folder, not legal documents. Evidence. Internal logs. Transfer data. Even surveillance screenshots. All of it tied to him. His face paled. You've been selling us piece by piece. You let them humiliate me in that bank, knowing it would blow back. You thought I'd lash out, ruin my credibility, while you and Global Logic launched a stolen version of my company. Marcus lunged forward. You can't prove I... Clarissa lifted a hand. A door opened. 2 federal agents stepped in. Cybercrimes Division. Marcus froze. Clarissa leaned forward, voice low. You're not going to jail for betraying me. You're going to jail for wire fraud, cyber espionage, and intellectual property theft. The agents cuffed him, but Clarissa wasn't done. She turned to the board. We're going public. On our terms. With our narrative. With full transparency. And we're going to expose every company that tried to silence us. Then she dropped the real bomb. I've authorized the Monroe Initiative, a $100 million fund to support minority-owned startups shut out by predatory tech practices. The board erupted in support. Applause. Cheers. But the war wasn't over. That night, Clarissa received a call from a block number. She answered. A voice. Deepcom male. You made your move. Now it's our turn. Click. No ID. No name. Just a threat. She turned to Maya. We're in the open now. Maya nodded. Let them come. Because what Global Logic and their hidden allies didn't understand. Clarissa Monroe had survived the war room, the glass ceiling, and the bank lobby. She didn't just fight back. She rebuilt the battlefield. And as her daughter secured the system and her team rallied behind her, a confidential memo leaked to the press that night. Global Logic under investigation for data theft, fraud, and international espionage. Clarissa read the headline from her balcony, smiled faintly, then turned her phone to record mode. Because the world deserved to hear the whole story. They underestimated her power. Now they feared her presence. Clarissa Monroe wasn't supposed to survive this long. Not in tech. Not in corporate America. Not after refusing to sell out or stay silent. But now the wolves were circling. And this time, they weren't hiding behind boardrooms or bank counters. They were in suits, at podiums, on news segments, twisting her story, spinning lies, framing her as a rogue CEO with a vendetta. Because powerful people don't like losing to a black woman with nothing left to prove and receipts that could burn empires to ash. The attack came fast. Her accounts were frozen. Anonymous articles hit major outlets, accusing her of fraud. An unnamed source claimed Monroe Dynamics used stolen code. The DOJ opened a surprise audit. But Clarissa knew better. This wasn't about legality. It was about erasure. They want you discredited before you testify. Naomi warned. Global Logic has Senate lobbyists on speed dial. Clarissa didn't blink. Let them watch. She wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a symbol of what happens when we build our own tables. And then defend them. The final blow came in the form of a sealed subpoena. They were calling her to D.C. Congressional hearing. National broadcast. A trap dressed as justice. Maya tried to stop her. They want to humiliate you on live television. Clarissa put on her black suit, gold brooch at her collar. Same one she wore the day she was sworn in as the youngest board chair in state history. If they want a spectacle, she said, I'll give them one. The room was full. Cameras everywhere. A line of senators seated above her like judges at an execution. The chairperson, Senator Alden, cleared his throat. Ms. Monroe, are you aware you're under investigation for wire fraud and antitrust violations? Clarissa leaned in, her voice clear, unshaken. I'm aware powerful men don't like being outsmarted. A ripple moved through the room. You built Monroe Dynamics through favoritism and diversity grants, didn't you? She smiled. No, Senator. I built it through 3 a.m. coding sessions, garage meetings, and raising 2 children as a widow. My only grant was God's grace. He pressed. You believe you were targeted? I know I was. And your evidence? Clarissa reached into her briefcase, pulled out a USB drive. Here's your evidence. Internal logs, financial trails, communications between Global Logic executives and your former aide, the one who resigned mysteriously 2 weeks ago. The silence hit like thunder. C-SPAN went silent. Then, the drive was handed to committee clerks. A whisper spread. Reporters sprinted to tweet. Senator Alden went pale. Clarissa stood. I'm not just here to defend myself. I'm here to expose a system that weaponizes access, erases ownership, and silences black excellence the moment it threatens the status quo. She paused, then added, You tried to erase me with lies, but I documented the truth. Applause broke out in the back, not from the politicians, from the people, her people. By midnight, hashtag I Stand With Clarissa was trending nationwide. Congress was flooded with calls. A class action suit was filed by 47 minority-owned businesses that had been pushed out of deals by Global Logic in the last 5 years. The dam had cracked, and the flood had begun. But this story? It doesn't end with one woman's win. It begins with your awareness. Because what happened to Clarissa Monroe isn't just fiction. It happens every day. In banks, in boardrooms, in meetings where the brilliance is black, but the credit is white. And now, it's time to fight back. If you've ever been disrespected, dismissed, or deliberately sidelined, this moment is yours, too. Speak up or use your silence like Clarissa did, but never, ever disappear. Share this story if it moved you. Subscribe for more powerful stories that speak truth to power and expose the injustices hidden behind politeness and marble counters. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Clarissa's shoes? Has something like this happened to you?